All right, so today we're going to talk about integer operations, and specifically we're working with adding. You'll notice over here I have my integer chips. We just have them digitally, so we're going to kind of work with those at first. But one of the first things you need to know is with integer operations, we have something called a zero pair. So when one positive and one negative add together, they actually cancel each other out, and it is called a zero pair. So as we work through some of these problems, we're going to do it mathematically, but also there's a strategy that I like to use called battle, so you're going to kind of see what that looks like as well. So we'll take this zero pair and we'll get rid of that. But let's say we wanted to do something like -4 plus 3, okay? So you have 4 negatives, 3, 4, and 3 positives, 2 and 3, and you really are just looking at how many zero pairs do you see. So we've got 1, 2, 3. All of those zero pairs cancel out, and what you're left with is -1. So -4 plus 3 would end up being -1. What we did mathematically is we took the absolute value of each of these, and the absolute value is just a number's distance from 0. So -4 is 4 away from 0, and 3 is 3 away from 0. So you subtract their absolute values. 4 minus 3 is 1. And then whichever number had the larger absolute value, which in this case, -4 had the larger absolute value. So your answer is negative because -4 had the larger absolute value. So you're really just looking at kind of which number has a larger absolute value, and you subtract to figure out how many things are left over. I like to use the term battle with my students as we're beginning to learn this. So we've got negatives battling positives, and the negative team wins because there's more negatives left over, so your answer is negative. So I'm going to kind of do both. We'll talk about absolute value and we'll talk about battling as well here, and we'll kind of go from there. So let's get rid of these guys, and we'll do some of these example problems. We also talk about, if we're talking about our term, right, if battle is our scenario, then we got to look at what team they're on. So for example, this first question says -15 plus -19. So if we're talking about battling, they're both on the negative team, and if I really wanted to, I could get out all these integer chips and I could have 15 negatives here and 19 negatives here, but it really wouldn't be a good strategy for us to use because we are not always going to have those integer chips in front of us. So if I have 15 negatives and 19 negatives, there's going to be no zero pairs to cancel out. So for us, we say they're on the same team. So if they're on the same team, you just group them. So you put them together. So I'm going to group 15 and 19. 9 plus 5 is 4. So I get 34. And if I put them together, they're on the same team. They're still going to be on the same team. So my answer here would be -34. Again, I didn't have any zero pairs to cancel out. There was no subtraction to be done because they have the same sign. They're on the same team. You group them. Okay? So B says 85 plus -105. 85 plus -105. So these guys, our strategy again, we're talking about battling. So if they have a different sign, which means one's a positive and one's a negative, that means they're not on the same team. So if they're not on the same team, we are going to battle. And if we're battling, that means there are some zero pairs here. We have 85 positive chips and 105 negative chips, and there are some things that are going to be canceling each other out. To figure out how many get canceled out, we need to do a tiny bit of subtraction. Again, this is an addition problem, but to solve it, we need to subtract their absolute values. So I'm going to take the absolute value of -105, which is 105. I'm going to take the absolute value of 85, which is 85, and I'm going to subtract them, and I get 20. Okay, so that means there's 20 things left over, and if I look at my initial question, I can see that the negative number has the larger absolute value, so my number is going to be negative. Basically, the answer, or the question that I ask my students is who wins? So if these two numbers were going to go to battle, which team would win? And in this case, the negative team would win, so my answer would be negative. Okay? Same situation, -5.5 and 9.8. These are actually not integers because integers are whole numbers and their opposites. So these are actually rational numbers, but we can actually add them the same way with the same strategy. So negative 5.5 and 9.8 are on different teams. They have different signs. So they are going to battle, which means we're just figuring out how many zero pairs get killed off during this battle. So to do that, we're going to do a tiny bit of subtraction. So 9.8 minus 5.5, and that's going to tell me how many things are left over. So there's 4.3 is what we got when we did our tiny bit of subtraction, and the team that has the larger absolute value, the team that wins the battle, is positive. So your answer is positive 4.3. Okay, last question. Negative 74 plus negative 15. So you ask, are they on the same team? Well, in this case, this is a negative and this is a negative, so they're on the same team. If they're on the same team, they're not going to battle each other. That'd be silly, right? So you're just going to group them. So to group them, I figure out they're going to combine together and make a larger group. So I get 89, and if they were on the same team before the battle, they're definitely still going to be on the same team after the battle. This would also be like you owe someone $74, and the next day you borrow another 15 and you owe them 15 more. Well, now you owe them $89. Okay? So again, kind of overall, overarching strategies here. If things have the same sign, all you do is group them. Okay, if things have different signs, we call it battle. Okay, and battle just means that you subtract their absolute values. Okay, and then you take the sign of the number with a larger absolute value. Okay, basically just talking about who wins the battle, right? So when we're talking about battle, who wins is what you're going with, okay?